I am here and I'm going to be preparing your second course for Parcel 2, your sweet and sour pork shank. I'm going to start with some knife cuts. Alright, so first we'll start with a leek. Usually with leeks, the entire thing is usable with the exception of the end, which I trimmed off. Usually there's a little bit of a root system at the bottom. For this preparation, I'm going to take all the dark green part off and just set it aside for stock. Definitely want to save something like that. There's a lot of really good flavor in the dark green part. I'm going to keep the cuts relatively large because any cuts that I do for a slow cook braise like this, they're going to shrink quite a lot. And I really, with this braise, I'd like to serve the vegetables with it. And so I want to make sure that I'm keeping my pieces rather large. So I'm just going to cut this leek down a little smaller like that. And I'm going to do the same with my mirepoix. I have some celery that I've already trimmed. I'm just going to cut it on a bias rather large. If those leeks had been really dirty, like filled with sand, sometimes they are, there's sand in between the layers, you can put them into water and agitate them, but I can tell that this leek is a very clean one. I actually ran under water first, so I'm not worried about it being dirty. Same with my carrots. Could do an oblique cut. Some preparations of braises, you end up straining the mirepoix out. With this preparation, because we're not straining it out, I'm just being a little bit more careful and thoughtful with the cuts, thinking about what they're going to look like on the plate later on, and being conscious of trying to make them a little bit larger so they don't just disintegrate, because a pork shank takes quite a long time to cook. I like a lot of carrot in a braise with pork shank. I'm trying to bring some sweetness to the sauce that's going to come with the braise. I'm hopeful that what you'll be able to see is, with a braise like this, you don't really need a whole lot of ingredients in order to create a lot of flavor. With the onions, I've just peeled them simply, and I'm going to cut them into each half into 3 wedges. Could maybe even do 4 if you wanted to. Either one will work. The onions really will just melt down quite a lot. So you don't have to be as discriminating about the perfection of the cuts with the onions. The Roma tomato, I'm just gonna cut in half, and then cut in half lengthwise, and then just cut once in half widthwise, just to get kind of like a really large dice. I'm not even bothered trimming it. While that would lend itself to a pretty rustic kind of cooking style when you're not trimming something like a tomato, I find that really with a braise, it's gonna break down so much. It's unnecessary and wasteful to trim off that end. Cut it in half lengthwise, and then each one of those halves in half again. Okay. Lastly, I have this Cubanelle pepper. Cubanelle seeds are actually edible, but this one's a lot bigger than sometimes they can be. I find with the smaller ones, I'll leave the seeds in. But with a big one like this, I'm going to cut all the seeds right out. And I don't know, it's funny. It's like I don't mind leaving the stem on the tomato, but leaving the pith on the inside of a pepper is one of those things that even if it's going to be cooking for a long time, it's a sort of definition of a refinement with technique. It's never going to be adding something pleasant, that pith on the inside of a pepper. And so you want to get rid of it. If it's there, it just shows a lack of care. It's like not even like leaving the peel on a carrot, because sometimes the peel on a carrot can be tasty if it's young enough and clean. this, what we'll do, just thin slice. So I have kind of the pepper cut down into planks. Cut those planks into strips. I'm gonna set this aside a little bit separately from my mirepoix. My tomatoes will definitely be something that we add later. I'm doing all my knife cuts at once, but keeping them separate because we're gonna add them in stages. This is a one-pot meal as far as the braise is concerned, but it is very much about the timing. So we have all of our mirepoix ingredients done. Just to show you kind of some other ingredients that are going to go into the braise as well. I have 3 sprigs of rosemary, a few sprigs of thyme, and some sage leaves. And I could chop these. I could leave them to just kind of float around in the braise, and then you'd kind of have to pick it out. But that works. And usually if I'm doing like really massive batches of braises, I'll do 2 big bundles or sometimes just a few big handfuls of tufts of herbs and kind of put them on the bottom. It's entirely up to you. I find that if you chop it up, I think the flavor gets lost a little bit. The flavor kind of lasts a little bit longer and therefore holds up to like a 4 or 5 hour cooking time a little better when you keep it whole like this. So I'm gonna just tie this with a little bit of twine and then I'll pull it out when the braise is done. I'm gonna keep those garlic cloves whole. Just smash them a little bit. Not even necessarily trying to like break them up, but more just like smash them so that the oils are exposed a little bit. And in my opinion, this is like the minimum amount of herbs and mirepoix that you can use in order to build more flavor in a braise. I think the more herbs you can use, the better, really. I mean, like, obviously you can overdo it, but having double or triple that amount would just make a more flavorful braise, and I think the same goes for the mirepoix ingredients. I'm also gonna, because you have enough herbs for both the braise and the polenta. During the knife cuts right now, I'm gonna be working on the herbs for the polenta as well, so make sure when you're going after your parcel, you don't just start like using all the herbs for the braise. You're putting the same herbs in both the braise and the polenta. So some of that sage I'm gonna chop up very fine. I'm kind of just folding the leaves on themselves and doing a simple chiffonade. Then I'll run my knife back through and chop it. I want these herbs to be pretty finely chopped. They're all like woody herbs, and therefore like I want them to be like chopped up and broken down in something like a polenta. I don't want the grains of herbs to be like something that you can kind of taste in a textural way when someone's tasting the polenta or when you're tasting the polenta. Chopping that up with the thyme. Okay, so this thyme has like little stemmy pieces off of it, and then like the main stem is super, super woody. You'll also see that like all the leaves are pointing upwards like that. So you want to pull in the direction that the leaves are not facing. So we're pulling down. I'm not going to get caught up and worried about those stemmy pieces. I'm just going to make sure that I chop them up. I cook polenta for like 40 to 45 minutes, and as long as I chop it up, there's no way that I'm not going to be able to break those stems down. It'll be just fine like that. In fact, I'll get more flavor. And again, like when you have minimal ingredients like you guys are going to have, like you don't want to just worry about, oh, I'll just pick the 25 little leaves that I have on this stem. No, like you want as much flavor as you can get. And in herbs, there is a ton of flavor in the stems. And so if you can use it, if it's not super woody like this is really woody, so we don't want to use that. But like a little stemmy piece here and there is not bad if you make sure to just grind it up real good with your knife. Same goes for the rosemary. You're going to want to pull in the opposite direction of the way the leaves go. And you could pull it off that way, but you're more likely to get stem when you pull it. We will chop the garlic. But I'll set it aside for now and finish up these herbs. I'm going to switch to my chef knife for this. I was using a vegetable cutter before. It's definitely the knife that I prefer. I could have used a chef knife for all of those knife cuts that I was doing before. But when it comes to something like chopping an herb, there's nothing like my chef knife. And hopefully with these demonstration videos, one of the things that you pick up is that even people that have been cooking professionally for 15 years, like chopping herbs effectively into finely chopped takes time. You know, I'm not just rushing through this process, and that's not just because I'm doing a demo. If I was cooking for myself, I wouldn't be rushing through this process and putting half chopped herbs up because I wanted to do it fast. Like, there's a point to taking the time to doing it thoroughly and correct. It's the finer details that are the most important part of cooking. Okay, so we have these finely chopped herbs, rosemary, sage, and thyme. I find sage and rosemary both are really, really strong, overpowering herbs. But what's strange is that when you put them in a combination together with thyme, they all kind of mellow each other out. Or maybe they just work together to form that like umami synergism that we talked about. Just like the combination of the three is better than each one on their own. So I use it all the time. Okay, so I have my chopped up herbs for my polenta, and I think we're gonna take a break.